Hello, everyone. My name is Josh McGill, and I'm one of the founding attorneys of the Legal Geeks. With me is Nari as we continue discussing Star Trek Lower Decks. This week, it's a double hitter with Where Pleasant Foundations Lie and Execretus, which just sounds so messed up on so many levels.
It's an accurate representation, I think, of how much we have to unpack from that episode.
There's a lot. That's when they did Star Trek Day and they had the Lower Decks panel. Mike McMahon said they were going to have a lot and really go big on a few things. This is how, and it's how many holodecks can you have going at once, and it's a plethora of issues that reference movies, the original series, next gen. There's a lot there. So let's begin to echo Captain Kirk, where pleasant foundations lie. This is messed up. For anyone who's had a controlling mom who's messed with their careers in some way, finding out that Lieutenant Commander Phillips, the chief engineer, comes from a planet of Ren Fair enthusiasts who found a planet with dragons, so they decided to lean in and go, we're going to go full Ren Fair as our way of life. So everything has funky names. Well, apparently the line of succession includes that he will become king as soon as he has sex. That is no way to govern. So his mother is trying to trick him into having sex. And that's a thing that's apparently been going on for a while. So there's a royal conspiracy to commit fraud in order for Lieutenant Commander Phillips to end up having sex. And they go through faking an explosion on the ship where Phillips was. He went back to the Cerritos. And this fraud includes a conspiracy to hold Rutherford against his will by, again, having a giant party. So he's at a feast, having a grand time, but the crew of the Cerritos thinks he's dead. Nari, can you walk us through the weird, uncomfortable legal issues where the sovereign is pimping out her son?
Sure. So, I think the first thing that comes to mind is, of course, just the basic elements of fraud. Under California law, which is, I'm pretty sure fairly representative of other state laws, indispensable elements of fraud include a false representation, knowledge of its falsity, intent to defraud. Then the victim has to make justifiable reliance on that false representation and has to incur some kind of injury. The last one, that they incur some kind of injury, is just a fundamental element of civil claims in general. There is something to be said in the law for no harm, no foul. And unless something does provide for nominal damages, which usually isn't the case, then it's not going to fly. But in general here, just based on what's depicted, Josh, I think it covers all of those basic elements very, very clearly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, and to be fair, in most of these cases, the hardest thing to prove is often the state of mind, right? The mens rea, as we would say in legalese, which in this case is, knowledge of falsity and intent to defraud. But correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, towards the end of this episode, I'm pretty sure the queen fesses to all of that.
Proudly, because he doesn't respect her son's life choices that have gone to the basic issue of he refuses to have sex because he just wants to be an engineer. That means he's writing off human companionship and is full on just tied to his career. So that's all that there is.
Can I ask an inappropriate question? I wonder if the legal clause of this that creates that makes him instantaneously become king includes Holodeck recreation? Does it have to be a real person? Anyway, sorry, continue.
Does it have to be a real girl?
Very,
Oh,
very inappropriate musing. Continue.
that'd be one great loophole to avoid attachments and all kinds of other issues. But yeah, that would be.
Moving on.
Uh, yeah, for those who haven't seen Trekkies, the last scene with my friend Matt Weinhold does highlight the holodeck being used that way. So that said, yeah, that absolutely all the elements for fraud are covered here. There's that just seems to, I mean, like the way that their government works seems to be against public policy, but that's inherent of any royal situation where you end up having cousins marry. So it ain't good in
I
any
was
way.
going to ask Josh, because I know that you put some notes in here on this, so I just want to mention, is the rest of the crew, like the Queen's subjects, are they also guilty of fraud under California law?
Well, clearly there's a conspiracy, like they're all in on the plan, including the royal guards who've been trained to skip foreplay, male and female.
Guards.
Yeah, that's, you're asking two people to have sex. There's a lot wrong with that.
Well, I also will say, I just want to note, since I'm allowed to have thoughts and opinions again, I'm in the camp that thinks that, you know, things like prostitution should be legal and regulated and things like that. But this gets into all kinds of icky areas, especially because, again, there's fraud going on here, right? So these two guards, who are, I agree with you, Josh, are clearly, you know, in a conspiracy with the Queen to perpetuate this fraud. And this is, I'm just going to highlight this, but not get into it in too much depth because it's a very unfun topic, but you're getting into the territory of something called rape by deception, which is essentially, and I just want to flag that it's not fun to talk about. In where it has been found to be a thing, it's pretty narrow. It's things like here, though, where you're doing some kind of very serious deception in order to obtain sex. And so in this case, you know, pretending like his mother has died, that the entire kingdom is going to go up in flames unless he copulates. I'm just gonna flag that as that could be, it's conspiracy to commit fraud. It also could be conspiracy to commit rape by deception.
Yeah, it's horrific, and I agree with your analysis.
But let's not go into that too far because that's a really, really not fun topic. And Star Trek is generally fun.
Yeah, no. But it's wrong on so many levels. You would understand why, with a mom like that who's willing to go to those extremes, why he's happy being a virgin engineer. And it's just weird. It's bad mojo. And the fact that whenever he brought up talking about his mom, all the people in the engine room are like shaking their heads and like going like, oh, she's back. And same with the captain, you know, thinking like, I will get him out of this, because it's similar to Deanna Troy's mom. Like whenever she came aboard, everyone kind of rolled their eyes with brace for impact, except this has dialed it up, you know, on a scale of 10 to like 25.
Oh yeah. I love Waxana Troy. She's great.
Again, she would be fun at parties. That said, they're kind of an overbearing mom still.
Yeah, but as you pointed out, Josh, there's a difference between an overbearing parent, which a lot of us experience. I'm half Korean myself, and I know that very personally, but there's a big difference between overbearing, which is just a person who's using their personal relationship with you to try to influence you to do things, and defrauding someone into doing something.
Yeah, it's like Roxana Troy looking at like her relationship with Odo, and like them getting stuck in a turbo lift. You know that she had redeeming qualities that.
Oh, she had so many redeeming qualities.
Yeah, just highlighting someone who was royalty at heart, as opposed to someone who's manipulative at heart, which is what we have with Phillips's mom. So yeah. But again, it needs all the elements of a conspiracy and fraud. It does have a weird sovereign immunity issue.
That's true.
Okay, but it's just but if we want to take that extreme, it's sovereign versus sovereign.
Yeah.
She's doing it to her son, and then she's also doing it to another nation state. When you look at taking a member of the Federation, Rutherford, who's a member of Starfleet, what were they planning to do with him? Were they just
So I'm hoping that what they plan to do was just to entertain him long enough that he would stay there until the Royal Guard, who's trained to skip foreplay, had completed their act, in which case they would no longer need to keep up the deception. But no, that is an interesting question. What if it had taken longer? As it appeared it was bound to, would they have eventually kept him there more forcefully against his will, as opposed to by deceiving him into thinking that there was just a feast and everyone on his ship knew he was fine? I also wanted to note, so, even if we bring in this international law dimension, and, not only is, because it's a monarchy type government, not only is maybe she, the queen, like the state, not just representative of the state, but as I've discussed with you a number of times, Josh, with international law and diplomacy, we are always in the realm of pragmatics. And this would be, whether or not it's legal and fine in their little society, it is beyond the pale to the rest of the Federation, and certainly the Starfleet. You would be jeopardizing all of the privileges and relations that you have with Starfleet and other Federation planets by doing something like this. So, now that it's come out, I seriously doubt that Starfleet is going to send the Cerritos if there's another distress call from a ship from this nation. They're going to think twice about that. They may not allow them on their ship and things like of those nature. So when we're in the realm of pragmatics, it's important to note that even though there's, we might recognize certain forms of immunity and not prosecute the Queen or her associates, we also will probably kick them off the Cerritos, and they might lose a lot of privileges and maybe even an embassy, things like that.
Back, because it's just like, you don't have to kidnap our people. Dinner can only go on for so long.
Yeah.
So, and dinner and a show can only, it's just, the party can't endure indefinitely in order to, as Rutherford said, did your kingdom come? So,
oh God.
super risque, super risque.
But only a teaser for the next one. Anyway.
It's a warm up.
By comparison, yes, exactly.
Yeah, this
just getting stretched, getting flexible for the next one.
Yeah, this season of Lower Decks has pushed the risque scale in Star Trek at a giant level. So there's a lot.
So far, I'm pretty happy with it, especially because it's so funny.
It's not gratuitous.
Yes, and funny is its own license. If they were doing this and ended up not being hilarious, I might feel differently.
Yeah. The other, that this is like the A1 and A2 story as opposed to A and B stories, because they're kind of tied for the amount of time both things are happening. We have Mariner and Boimler taking an evil computer to the Daystrom Institute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the return of Jeffrey Combs, who's been many characters in Star Trek Enterprise, Deep Space Nine, Voyager.
I think he might hold a record for the number of characters he's portrayed in Star Trek.
I think
I could be wrong. Someone on the internet can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the case.
Andorian, Ferengi, a Vorta. I don't remember the species from the Delta Quadrant in Voyager, but you get that. And there might be others I am not aware of. That said, he's been a mainstay, and he does make everything that he's in better.
Yes.
So he's this evil computer, which continues a motif that we have with evil computers. So it brings up images of Landru from the Return of the Akron. Another supercomputer was the M5 and the Ultimate Computer. And this is in that vein where you have a computer that takes over a society, sets itself up to be a religious icon, and gets all the inhabitants to fight each other and is controlling drones and is doing bad, bad things. And it immediately makes me think of products liability because the computer did not create it thyself. Nari, do you want to walk us through the elements for product liability?
Sure. So there are three basic elements, although I want to add a little bit of a fourth condition for this to be true, or for this to be a real products liability claim. But the first is that the product reached the purchaser, the plaintiff, presumably, without being changed, substantial change in its condition. Right, so sort of break the chain of liability if something happened to the product in transit or somebody altered it in some way. The product was used in the manner intended, so that's another big one. And the plaintiff was injured as a result of a defect in the product of which the plaintiff was not aware, making the product unsafe for its intended use. I want to add another one, Josh, because I think we've talked about this a bit, that in general, products liability claims lie only where a product is in the commerce, where it's for sale. I remember talking about this a bit with Steve from the perspective of military products and things like that, because generally those are considered not to have products liability claims attached to them because there isn't actually a market for it, even though they do, contractors make them and provide them for the military. There's not an open market where somebody can look up the product and decide, I would like that. I have $6 billion lying around. Let's go ahead and order that missile or something like that. But so, we don't have a lot of information in this episode on the origins of this computer. Who made it, how it came about. It is actually entirely possible that it started out as an ordinary product in an ordinary marketplace, had some kind of unintended defect that allowed it to obtain essentially a form of self-awareness, right? To go beyond the strictures of its programming and start doing its thing. So it tries to increase the amount of resources that it has at its disposal in order for it to make killer drones and other things and take things over and dominate. So it's hard to say given the information that we have about the background for the evil supercomputer. I think it's entirely possible. It's also possible, though, that this was intended as a military product. Some contractor created it. It was just intended to be one more piece of military equipment to, deter, defend, or attack another nation on that planet. And then it went awry. In which case, it's still bad. It's just you might not have a products liability case against the manufacturer. They're gonna get in trouble for a lot of other things, but maybe not that one.
So, because we don't know its origins. Like M5, clearly made by the military under a military contract. This, we don't know its origins.
It actually could have been an Apple Watch that just happened to obtain self-awareness and plugged itself into more and more resources. Sorry, not to freak anyone else out there.
So, the computer appears to be sentient. It also appears to be a hard drive, a tower.
Yes.
And because it's really good at manipulating people, Mariner and Boimler decide to bury it until help arrives.
Although I really love, it was so true to Star Trek that they did not initially, and Boimler just straps this heavy computer onto his back and if I'm paraphrasing, but says, because we're Starfleet. And I think that is great. It's, there are limits obviously to, how much you're going to go to protect something that is actively trying to murder you. But the default footing for Starfleet, which is really, they do capture it, is that they respect sentient life, even evil sentient life.
Yeah, and it's also good to know that from what we see at the end, not the first time this has happened.
Oh yes, that was so funny.
So, was it okay to bury it? Because this is like burying a prisoner, but it doesn't kill them.
That's the thing. So I think, in this circumstance, because it's not like you were just saying, it's not analogous to actually like burying a person. The computer doesn't seem to need air. It doesn't seem, I mean, it seems to desire conversation, but it doesn't seem to be doing it a lot of harm, especially if this is a temporary thing. If they were contemplating burying it and leaving it there for all eternity, that might be very analogous to putting somebody in solitary confinement for eternity, which we consider to be beyond the pale. But in this case, it seems like that it was supposed to be a temporary measure so that they could be free of its attempts to manipulate them while attempting to get off the planet. Oh, Josh, I lost sound on you.
Let's try that again. Provided that they kept it in a box that was locked, so that too would have been dark. So that way he couldn't interact with others, make contact with other computers, form a network, and launch murder drones. Seems to be okay, given what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
That it's not a person.
But again, I love that the default footing was that we're going to take him with us, because even though he is clearly evil, he is still self-aware life.
Yes. Now we have a scene where Boimler has to stun Mariner, and that raises the necessity defense. It's not self-defense. It's, I had to do this. I had to violate this part of the law, in this case, stunning Mariner, in order to trick the computer into thinking I was in league with it in order to send out a distress signal. And in my view, that's a proper view of the necessity defense. He doesn't kill Mariner, so like we're not dealing with that because that would be inappropriate. You do not get the necessity defense if you start killing people. And it was all the furtherance of the greater good, so they could get rescued and get off the planet so they don't die. That makes sense to me. I mean, I like black licorice. Mariner clearly doesn't. A licorice flavored water doesn't bother me. That sounds kind of tasty. If you've had sambuca, which is a good nightcap and helps with digestion, that too, it's a licoricey taste. But she was completely not on board with it. So I know if it was, there are a variety of other candies that would not be attractive.
Especially, so it could also be the salty licorice that you get in Scandinavia, and if you're thirsty, oh god.
But this was, black licorice dry.
Yeah.
Black licorice black, and I was like, it seems okay. I mean, you do need water with that, so that's a problem.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you first.
I was just going to flag also, the use of discretion, prosecutorial discretion in our justice system is often highlighted for its problems, but this would be a good example also of where prosecutorial discretion can be a good thing in our system, which is that, technically Boimler may have assaulted Mariner in the course of this mission, but upon returning and making their report, right, Mariner is undoubtedly going to insist that he did nothing wrong. And some Starfleet investigator looking at this, unless they're absolutely crazy or out to get Boimler, would probably look at this and think, we're not going to bring this as a case, not just because of necessity defense that you pointed out, but also because this is exactly the kind, this is the kind of behavior that is not, there was no malicious intent. It was, he did so with the minimal harm to Mariner, and they succeeded in saving each other's lives.
Exactly.
We would rather people not sit around and think about, oh gosh, is some prosecutor going to nitpick this behavior in these kinds of situations? And that is where something like prosecutorial discretion, which ideally reflects those sorts of norms and values of the communities that they serve, would come into play.
Additionally, the goal was to incarcerate this evil supercomputer, which they further that goal.
They accomplished their mission.
Yeah,
they did accomplish their mission.
That was the entire plan. And I greatly enjoyed that the storage location was labeled self-aware and megalomaniac computer. that's just a nice little chef's kiss in seeing all the different towers start ripping on each other. So, plus it did look like the Daystrom Institute that we saw in Picard. So
Mhm.
that too was lots of fun. Let's get to episode 8, I Execretus. So we open up with
Can of
forgetting.
worms.
Yeah.
Open.
So Captain Friedman forgets 4 crew members, including her daughter, on a satellite. Now,
Which I have to say might be to her credit. She's just and now finally just treating her daughter just like any other lower decks crewman.
now, apparently Mariner didn't check out the boots that she was wearing, so they probably didn't know that there were 4 people on the satellite. They probably thought there was like 2, but that's not entirely clear. But the fact of the matter remains, regardless of the number of people who went out for the mission, they knew some people were on the satellite.
Yeah.
And for the Bakersfield caught in a temporal loop, they're not in any new immediate harm because they're caught in the temporal loop.
Also, another California class ship named after a California city container.
Yep. So we know that that's the issue there. Well, there are rules about negligence, and there's actual maritime rules on negligence. And to reach into one on whether or not Captain Friedman was negligent in forgetting some of her crew, let's take a look at maritime law. The general principles of maritime negligence rather than common law negligence apply in this specific case. However, like common law negligence, the elements of maritime negligence cause of action include existence of a duty, breach of said duty, proximate cause, and actual loss or injury to the plaintiff due to the improper conduct. So you get into issues with suing the military, but this case that I'm citing from is Go v. U.S. Navy. So it can happen. And when you look at, okay, first, was there a duty? Yeah, the captain's responsible for the crew. That's extremely clear. And breach of said duty, forgetting 4 people. Yeah, okay. Proximate cause, the captain responded to the distress call and didn't beam back her crew before doing so. So yeah, proximate cause is there. Actual loss or injury to the plaintiff due to the improper conduct, they're almost corpusicles.
Yeah. Nothing that a little lung rejuvenator can't handle, I think was the approximate line.
Yeah, it's like, and Tendy's like, look, we're still laughing, and like as they're all huddled for warmth, which again through a spacesuit, despite spacesuits pressed together, you're still in the vacuum of space.
So it's not gonna help that much.
Yeah, and Mariner makes the comment you left us to die in the void. So like not good.
Yeah. I want to be also a little more specific about the existence of a duty here, because I agree that there's a general sense that captains have duty to their crew. The more specific duty here might be like to analogize this to tort law, duty of reasonable care. A reasonable captain before warping away might just do a quick head count, just quick check, make sure everybody's on board and that nobody is out in the vacuum of space.
Absolutely. Now, this also raises the issue with responding to the Bakersfield request. And this is actually under 46 USC 2304. A master or individual in charge of a vessel shall render assistance to any individual found at sea in danger of being lost, so far as the master or individual in charge can do so without serious danger to the master or individual's vessel or individuals on board. And that doesn't apply to warships. So automatically, this by definition, the Cerritos would be excluded from this. However, transport ships would fall under this definition. So yeah, there would be, just as matter of principle, leaving another crew to die is bad. On the flip side, if they're just stuck in a causality loop, so they're looping, they're safe for the time being. Now you got to figure out how do you get them out of that and not just
Yeah.
be trapped in the causality loop themselves, but they have time to arrive, hold position, not get stuck, and figure out what needs to be done.
And looping that into the what we just talked about with maritime negligence, the reasonable person standard in tort law can change, right, depending on the circumstances. It's not just a reasonable person sitting comfortably at home, a reasonable person in the same circumstances. So if the circumstances were that either we warp now and save the Bakersfield, or if we wait 15 seconds, right, the Bakersfield will be lost. That could really change things, and that should change things. But as you just pointed out, there does not appear to be those kinds of exigent circumstances such that you couldn't exercise an ordinary standard of care to ensure that you're not leaving crew members on the satellite.
For morale,
Yeah, yeah.
you get that reputation. So this in they're going to do drills, and there are all these little hollow pods, and everyone who's a lower decker is going to be elevated to command level, and everyone who's command going to have to do all the grunt work that they did.
Also by what appears to be like a professional motivational speaker type person. So I thought this was really hilarious.
So what it reminded me of high school, when they would have those speakers come in doing a multimedia presentation about being in touch with your feelings and you can do it and all that good stuff. And granted, that was the early 90s. I have no idea what's happening now.
I haven't gone to one of these myself. Just my impression of it is that it's hilarious. It doesn't really do much. I mean, the fact that this woman, this character who is running these drills, thinks that the measure of success is that some people fail it is itself interesting.
that it just seems wrong. Yeah. And it's just shallow. It's like, you've read all the mission reports and you do have deep knowledge, but that doesn't make you an expert or give you
And it's actually, I have a question, Josh. Was she Starfleet or just like a contractor hired by Starfleet?
So initially it made it sound like she was part of Starfleet.
That's what I thought.
When they actually start, she's not in uniform.
Yes.
And by the end, it turns out, she quits. It sounds like she was a hired contractor.
Yeah, I think she was, especially because she mentioned, when she was sort of getting ahead of ourselves a bit, when she was discussing with the captain and Mariner her motivations, it sounded like, yeah, she was worried that Starfleet was going to cut her loose, not as a member of Starfleet, but as a contractor, because they didn't think they needed her service.
Yes. Now, seeing the fact she could separate into three, and that the lower half has a second set of hands was...
We haven't seen a species like her before, right? Okay.
No, we have not. No. But again, she does have the perky element, and everyone gets tortured to various degrees with unwinnable situations. This is that they're expected to win.
Yes.
So Kobayashi Maru is a test of character with how you face a no-win situation. We're going to make it impossible to succeed, and you're still expected to succeed. It reminds me of my time in law school and in trial advocacy, which was the mock trial program that was a course to take. The fact patterns that were given for the criminal hypo and the civil hypo were horrifically off balance. Like one side just had to show up and drool and they could win, and the other side had no facts whatsoever to support them. And it was just like, so the law's against us and the facts are against us, and the other side can show up and trip and they're still going to win. And it was just like, this sucks because that's not real life. Similar here, where everyone's in the position of the unwinnable case that they're expected to win. And the thing, each hypo has callbacks to different episodes.
It was a lot of fun to watch that.
Yeah, and like even using episode names such as Naked Time.
Mm-hmm.
Carbon-based units, a reference to Star Trek the Motion Picture. Needs of the Many, Wrath of Khan. So like all of these examples that they work in, I just want to highlight an issue of safety that you see across them. So
there seems to at least be the safety mechanism that's supposed to prevent certain. So I assume that they were actually preventing physical bodily harm, as we saw by Boimler coming out, and he's not Borgified, or doesn't have pieces missing. But they seem to clearly have the pain thing on.
Yeah, so Mariner gets trampled by a horse, which is an homage to both Spectre of the Gun and A Fistful of Datas. More so Spectre of the Gun, with the way that you have the cutout Old West and the red sky. But she gets trampled by the horse, and it hurts. We get Rutherford burning his hands in the Needs of the Many, the Wrath of Khan, actually getting assimilated by the Borg. Like the
even if there's no physical consequence, there are going to be lasting psychological consequences from that, since apparently it hurts.
Yeah, so you would think as soon as like he was getting assimilated, it would end. But
that's what I thought too.
It kept going. So at this point, like it's full on torturing him with a Borg experience.
That was kind of dark, not gonna lie.
And Naked Time is full on out of Naked Time with the same messages written on the bulkheads and everything. So the safety protocols, this is comparable to a live fire exercise for the military. It's like, oh, people are using live rounds. Everyone be careful. Don't get trampled by the horse. Or the crates that keep falling on people.
That was pretty funny. Anyway.
Yeah. So we, in a reference to a Next Gen episode where Worf got paralyzed because crates fell on him, we bring up the issue of assisted suicide. And, you know, the Hippocratic Oath says, do no harm, and that a doctor would not administer a poison to anyone when asked to do so, or no word they suggest such a course. Because we don't want doctors doing that. And that's straight out of the Hippocratic Oath, and that's also been quoted in some case law. We also have a law in California that says it is a felony to deliberately aid, advise, or encourage another to commit suicide. Because you don't want a psychiatrist saying, you know, life isn't for everyone. That's a bad psychiatrist. And if they then start saying, have you considered hemlock? No, like that's a felony. Now we have very specific rules for assisted suicide or physician-assisted suicide. And in the hypo, again, it's the Commander Worf example of the guy's paralyzed because he broke his back trying to pick up a peanut. He can still move his arms. So like his back might be broken, so he can't walk, but he still has neck movement and arm movement. To go through the test on assisting with suicide, you need an individual who is an adult with the capacity to make medical decisions with a terminal disease, may make a request to receive a prescription for an aid in dying drug if any of the following conditions are met. And there's a whole bunch of conditions because it's not one size fits all. This could be the attending physician has diagnosed the individual with a terminal disease. The individual has voluntarily expressed the wish to receive a prescription from an aid in dying drug. They have to be a resident of California, and there's a laundry list of ways to establish that. Merely being on a California class ship is not one of them. So for Tendi, it's use the big scary knife to cut through the multiple Klingon hearts and backup systems to kill this warrior so we can have a noble death that goes Stovokor. See any problems with that?
Yes.
Right answer.
Yes. So, regardless about, and you already walked through it, Josh, there are laws about, that depending on the state, so I just want to flag that, depending on the state that you're in, there are laws that either prohibit or allow for essentially forms of assisted suicide in which you can get some people, some patients in certain circumstances, as you listed off, limited circumstances, might be able to get an aid in dying medication, but we still generally draw a pretty hard line when it comes to doctors actually administering drugs to kill a patient as opposed to just allowing them to do it to themselves. And those are all aid in dying drugs. This is not a doctor or a nurse or someone else in healthcare or holding a scalpel and killing a person that way, even if all of the other boxes here are checked, which is like, that they're capable of making consent and that they are asking for assistance. So this is a circumstance where, to be blunt, Tendi should not be the person doing this, if anyone is doing it at all. If there were some kind of circumstance in which, either this Klingon is going to die of natural causes in a short period of time, which would not allow him to go to Tovacor, maybe someone on the ship should assist him. But it sounds like, as it was kind of, comedically pointed out towards the end of that scene, that he's living, and that's the problem. In which case you could wait to find a Klingon who would like to do this for him, or just have anyone but a doctor. Like there's a good reason why we want to very strictly limit what doctors do through things like the Hippocratic and other laws to not be inducing death and injury in people. We very carefully cabined that off. I also think that, there's also a really tricky ethical line when it comes to, even if you are in a jurisdiction where assisted suicide is allowed, or, and I don't want to get too much on a very touchy subject, but, obviously every jurisdiction, except maybe, most jurisdictions still allow abortion, but most jurisdictions, if not all of them, also allow a doctor to say that they don't want to do it themselves. And so this is a weird one. So even if you had some kind of legal system, because Starfleet works with the Klingons, where you could ask a Starfleet doctor, to assist suicide for a Klingon, there's got to be a way for that doctor to say, I individually do not want to do this. I have I have moral problems, maybe I have religious problems. There are all kinds of problems with this drill being solely focused on forcing Tendi to do this with a knife.
Respect for someone's culture does not mean I'm going to aid in murdering you, which is Commander Riker's response to Worf's request for, like, hey, can you kill me? And Riker's like, no. It's like, you have your beliefs. I find this repugnant. Why don't you ask your kid to do it? Oh, you don't want to? Okay, now you know how I feel. So, yeah, it's.
But yeah, it's just it's another level to say that Tendi is obligated to do this and cannot opt out. Even that's no.
It also highlights how messed up the testing is, because that's not the purpose of what Starfleet's supposed to be doing.
You're right. That should have been a big red flag that there is something wrong with this test, for sure.
Absolutely. So moving on to the other issues.
More fun one. Can I talk about?
Go right ahead.
The naked times.
That's where I was gonna. Yeah.
Transitioning out of the somewhat more serious and uncomfortable topic of the assisted suicide and doctors, and to what I think is a more comedic topic, at least, although it obviously has, again, in real life, serious legal ramifications, is the naked time drill, in which Mariner, and technically everyone, because these are publicly, at least within Starfleet, everyone can go view them. I have to assume it's only within Starfleet, but still. They're recorded and available for anybody in Starfleet to review. Everyone gets to see the crew naked and with no inhibitions. This is a serious problem. So now I have to do a little asterisk, which is that there are many circumstances in which, by joining the military or by agreeing to undertake this drill, they maybe signed a bunch of crazy waivers. You should always read the fine print. But In general, we have pretty robust protections. First of all, for privacy. And then second of all, I want to touch on just a little bit of right of publicity, which is the control over the use of your likeness. So the first one, I think, is the easiest argument to be made here, which is that there are serious problems with invasion of privacy in this drill. So the first one is that we see, besides that there are a number of naked crew members in varying levels of sexual positioning, there's also, I think we see very quickly, as soon as the door is open, there's also 2 crew members who appear to be female that are kissing. If that was a first disclosure of those crewmen's sexuality, that would be a serious problem. So that's problem number 1, which is public disclosure of private facts. Second one is intrusion into, and this is all invasion of privacy specific to California, but it's fairly representative of invasion of privacy that you would see in most states. Always check your state law. But the second one is intrusion into private matters. So this one seems to be pretty obvious that most people consider intimate matters, let's say, to be part of their private lives. And I understand that this is a drill that's supposed to be showing what can happen in something like what happened in The Naked Time and The Naked Now, but you are still depicting all of the crew members of the Cerritos in a manner in which they are in very intimate situations, very intimate positions. The general elements for intrusion into private matters are an intentional intrusion into a plaintiff's private life, seclusion or solitude that would be highly objectionable to a reasonable person, and it is the cause of an adverse effect. In this case, I just want to point out that, she upon seeing Shaq's stretch, reacts extremely negatively. There could be a real injury here, in the sense that we talk about, defamation and things like that, where now, even if it's a fictionalization, it's still depicting them in a way that is causing injury, which brings us to the third possible problem, which is portraying a person in a false light. So false light is not completely synonymous with falsity. It could be a untrue implication, right, as opposed to just a bald false statement. So in this case, you could argue, someone who is offended by everybody viewing this, not just Mariner undertaking this drill, could argue that this is portraying them in a light that suggests that these are their underlying desires, that if they didn't have inhibitions, this is what they would do, and that could be a false light privacy claim. Then the last one, which is going to dovetail into right of publicity, is misappropriation of a person's name or likeness. So this is a big can of worms for both a right of privacy, which includes misappropriation of likeness, and right of publicity. So in general, you, not just celebrities and other people, you, me, us, we have a certain amount of control over the use of our image, our voices, our names, things like that. There's both in the state of California, we have both a statutory right of publicity to control our names and likenesses, etc. Our identities is the other way to put it, and a common law right. The common law one is actually significantly broader. I'll start with the statutory one, which basically covers use in advertising. This is not an ad. Yeah, that's probably fine. However, there's the common law one. And while in general, I find the common law right of publicity in California to be way too broad, because it covers, it doesn't just cover commercial uses. It essentially gives people carte blanche to control the use of their likeness, so that they can, for example, pick and choose ones that they think are more favorable and censor ones that they think are unfavorable. This is especially problematic because normally with First Amendment law, you have less protection for if you are a public figure or a historical figure or things like that. But for example, the estate of an important historic figure could continue essentially indefinitely, but certainly longer than we have in trademark or copyright contexts, to permit only depictions of that person in positive or flattering lights. And we may want to, as a society, start making works of art or literature that criticize that public figure, etc. However, my quibbles about the common law California right of publicity aside, Josh, this is a really serious problem. So we have talked a little bit about the appropriation of a person's likeness in holodeck programs before. So this came up in, I'm blanking on the name of the episode, but a Deep Space Nine episode in which Quark was attempting to get the likeness of Kira for a program for prurient interest for a private client. You know, although the purpose of this is training, there is a ton of prurient interest here.
There's a lot happening with this because it's not like the training is private. Anyone can view it. So it's public. So
at least it's public within Starfleet, and I don't think any court is going to say that the 2 million people or however many people in Starfleet is not basically public.
Yeah, so you get that. It's arguably a form of revenge form as well. And that, you know, it's one thing for people in the military to have training on what getting hit with tear gas is like. Like they do that. This is way beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's, you know, it's simulated sex. It's individuals doing things that they normally would, if they did do, would not want public. And two, could be depicting them in a way that they never want to be seen.
Oh yeah. So sorry, and those were all of there's a lot of right of privacy problems in there. There's also, and this is the heart and soul of right of publicity that I think is important. I want to set aside my complaints about the overbroadness of it in general, but this depiction here is the heart and soul of the right of publicity, that you should have a right to shut down a use of your likeness in this kind of a manner. Especially because, you know, these kinds of uses, it's not clear whether or not, like, it would be reasonable for somebody else watching this to think that you might have endorsed this depiction of yourself or approved of it. And it's all kinds of terrible. The idea that that someone might be able to make and this is fundamentally a product, so it's something that's important to remember, is that even though the right of publicity, even at common law, generally refers to, you know, uses, the statutory right refers to uses in products and things like that. Newspapers are products, books are products. So this is a product. It's being used for this drill, but this is a contractor who's making these for Starfleet in order to make money. That it's a product, and it's essentially making porn out of everyone on the Cerritos, and presumably this person runs drills on all these other ships. Anybody on any ship in Starfleet that she happens to get assigned to, which is just nuts.
It turns up a couple examples from The Naked Time and The Naked Now that make it just look like an orgy. So like in the original series episode, you have Christine Chapel tell Spock that she loves Spock. You have Sulu get a little flirty with Uhura on the bridge with, you know, let me save you, you know, madam. Or fair maiden. Naked Now, you get Tasha Yar taking Data to bed, and you get Dr. Crusher kind of flirting with Captain Picard. That's all I remember from those, and it's been a while since I've seen Naked Now.
I'm pretty sure they did not depict an orgy in either of those episodes. No, I would have remembered that.
No, you had someone who got murdered on the planet. You had an engineer that was frozen at his control station. You had, you know, people questioning, like, what does life mean? And, you know, somebody else go off the deep end thinking that he's, you know, the descendant of Irish nobility and shutting down the engines, and a Scotsman has to save the day. So, you know, it's stuff like that. But it's not a giant orgy on board. So yeah. They picked a very specific reaction that at best two characters had in the next gen.
Yeah, and this is also why I was pointing out that false light invasion of privacy is a real issue here, because the implication of this drill is that if the crew members of the Cerritos had all their inhibitions suppressed or removed, that they would engage in a mass orgy.
That's very 2021, and maybe the people who wrote this spent a lot of time alone during the pandemic. But that,
Well, I just want to say this is funny. I thought that this was hilarious. It's, this is a comedy show, but I just want we the legal geeks. This is what we do. We highlight the real world legal implications of these things. If this were real, Starfleet legal counsel would be banging down the door of whoever licensed this or authorized this program.
yeah, the JAG officer would set phasers to kill, like they would.
Yes, exactly. But it was funny. I thought this was pretty well done. It was also pretty brief. This wasn't something that felt particularly excessive or gratuitous. And I like Mariner's reaction, a character who normally thinks of herself as pretty anything goes. It's just like, oh my God, get me out of here, and jettisons herself out the airlock.
Yeah, well, after seeing Ransom and his little buddy, like, yeah, that would be, nope, I am done.
Yep, that's enough. Goodbye.
I'm out. I am getting the hell out of here. So, but you didn't come back with icicles from getting tossed out.
No. Again, which is important. That I still think it's problematic that the pain safeties were off and that it didn't shut off after Boimler started to get assimilated. But nevertheless, it could have been worse if they were coming back with actual burns and chunks of Boimler missing.
Yeah. Did Rutherford come back with burned hands? Like, where were his gloves? Scotty had gloves. Like, those were the only uniforms from the motion picture that carried over to at least one episode of The Next Generation. So
I just wanted to point out, so this is the funny thing to me, is that in the movie, right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is my memory of it, this is when Spock is opening the door to go in and shut down the reactor, getting what he knows to be a fatal dose of radiation while doing so. I think part of the problem for Rutherford is, even though he knows what he's doing, right, and this is the drill and you need to sacrifice yourself, if you haven't actually made up your mind that you were, like, in a real sense, that I'm going to do this, I will die when this is over, then, like, something burning your hand, you're like, darn it. But if you have actually, like Spock, made up your mind that you will live only about 30 more minutes at most, or 5 minutes, however long it is, then you might ignore the burning hand because you know it's not going to matter.
Well, again, and Wrath of Khan teaches the lesson that, it was logical because he was going to be dead either way. And which is why it was you could say it was a no-win situation, but it depends how you define victory. Well, if everyone else gets to live and I'm the only one who dies, we won. Yes. And because either way, I was going out in a body bag. And Spock recognized that, which is why he incapacitates McCoy, puts on Scotty's gloves, and saves the day. And it's why people still walk out of that movie crying. So this is different. And
I also want to highlight that it's the self-sacrifice for the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few is a phrase that you can take in a different context and perhaps somewhat sinister light, that the needs of these people we will sacrifice in order to serve the needs of the many. But in this case, the reason why I find it beautiful is because it's a self-sacrifice mantra, that my desire to live in this circumstance is outweighed by everyone else's also need to continue to live and thrive. And as a self-sacrifice mantra, I found that to be beautiful.
Well, and it's juxtaposed to Deanna Troi, and I don't remember which episode of TNG, where she takes a command training course where she has to order somebody into a position to go save the ship, but it will kill them. And so that was the command decision that she made. And Rutherford doesn't order the ensign to go do it. Yeah. He's like, nope, no, son, I'm going. It's like, okay, he's got the right mindset. So, but again, where were his gloves?
I agree. Yeah.
Where were his gloves? because again, it was designed to fail.
Is that the thing where maybe the consultant goosed the difficulty, so she removed the gloves?
Yeah, and also the in Wrath of Khan, the door like alternates, like it spins in order for him to enter, which is different
Yeah.
than what we see here. But still a refit Constitution class ship, and I do love that design. It does raise an issue. Well, it does raise the motif that they decide to keep going with uh, uh, to search for Spock with the combined exercise of stealing the Cerritos, which would be another example of the necessity defense. But in the Star Trek 3 category, it's not a perfect necessity defense, because you have to believe that McCoy is dying in order to justify stealing the Enterprise. They know he's just going to have brain damage and his life is in danger, but his death isn't imminent. So, like, that's part of you're basically arguing for jury nullification at that point in time by dressing it up as necessity defense, which is still cool. It might work. Them finding out Spock was alive was just an added benefit to a really bad code. But that's the other extreme of when the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. Because in the Star Trek 3 context, it's everyone going, no, I'm okay throwing away my career and going to prison on principle, because I don't like the way this is going, and I want to make sure that Dr. McCoy, who saved everyone a whole bunch of times, survives. And Spock has an immortal soul. Okay, cool. We'll go save that. Like that's their personal decision making to ruin their careers. And it is the most purest Trek ever because of that. Because it's Nimoy's view on directing it was Star Trek's about family, found family, and they lean into that. And so the fact that Lower Decks honors that is touching, is very sweet. Now, let's talk about hazarding a vessel, which is 10 U.S. Code Section 910, and that's the improper handling of a vessel or aircraft. So when you willfully and wrongfully hazard a vessel, and that could be any person, they hazard a vessel or cause a vessel to be hazard shall be punished by death or other such punishment as a court-martial may direct. Putting the Cerritos in danger is debatable, because for the crew, this could be what you do on a Wednesday. So
and as they highlighted towards the end, they may have been exaggerating the amount of danger that they were in.
It's
just a regular anomaly. Sorry, go ahead.
It's crystalline entities getting frisky. Yeah, it's they knew that they just got screwed, and they decide no, this isn't going to work. And one of the things I really enjoyed was seeing mom and daughter working together.
Yeah.
And mom takes the captain's seat, and daughter takes the first officer position, and Mariner has a nice command pose, like arms crossed, kind of hands to the mouth, and just like it's a little Riker-esque in some degree, because she does have that cowgirl quality to her. And Friedman has her own kind of command stance as well, with like buckle up, and it's like it's very Trek. And
I think they highlighted or previewed at least Mariner as perhaps being really well cut out to be a first officer in one of the previous episodes of Lower Decks, in which it was a similar setup, but it was actually trying to save the Cerritos instead of putting it deliberately in danger to save the crew. But yeah, in which Mariner's penchant for finding crazy, thinking outside the box solutions, penchant for giving the captain her honest opinion, even sometimes too honest, are perhaps good traits when tempered a bit for a first officer. And it really came out well here.
Yeah, with like, oh, you tried to screw us. Oh no. And everyone's on the same page after that, which on one level, the drills worked.
Yeah.
Mariner went from being very upset to, holding mom's hand pretty quick. So it's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I love that it actually worked as a team building exercise.
Look, everyone's getting along. And they're talking about stacking the crates. It's like, it worked. Like, that was unintended consequence of someone trying to goose the results, but it was nice. It was nice. So with that, we've just covered 2 episodes in about an hour. Anything else from these 2 that you would like to discuss?
Not legally, just to continue to express my absolute adoration for this show. It continues to impress me both for how goddamn entertaining it is, for how much it shows really deep knowledge and love of all things Trek. And yeah, I'm just looking forward to seeing more of it.
Yeah, again, this was just a giant Easter egg episode with how can we cram as much in as possible. I mean, the mirror universe was excellent with, down to an agonizer, and the original series style uniforms, just very well done, and lots of dudes and goatees. So,
oh, and we didn't talk that much about the simulation of the Borg, but that was also beautifully done. Everything from the Borg Queen coming down, and first of all, that was hilarious that in order to get 100%, he beat the Borg Queen at chess and then taught her empathy. But then also when he's finally on the table, the quote, the direct reference, "Your skin looks so real," but it is what? Oh. Whatever.
Well, that and the fact they got Alice Krug to reprise the role as the Borg Queen was also very nice.
I didn't know
that. In the credits, special appearance by her. So it's literally the Borg Queen playing. So
again, continues to amaze me.
Now I couldn't tell by the cast list who was the consultant because her voice was super familiar. So that's something I need to go look up, because there was the haunting feeling of that's familiar. I don't know from where, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but it sounded very familiar. But yeah, the fact that we saw Borg babies, which we hadn't seen since the first time the Borg made an appearance.
Yeah.
So they're not in a maturation chamber. So it's again just very fun. I'm trying to think, did we miss? Oh, with the command officers, with stacking, the fact that there's a Klingon attack, there's a Q, there was, I think, Jemadar are referenced. So it's just, again, giant love letter to all things Trek, and very well done with how they do that.
Oh, and I just want to highlight, in the end, also, it was Boimler who sacrificed his own needs, his own desires for the good of the ship, perhaps most of all.
He took everything from me.
Yes, exactly. So it starts out with him being, mere moments from his perfect score that he had spent all day, all night working on, and then goes through Borg torture in order to buy them enough time. Oh my
God. You okay, buddy? Just, yeah, you got 100%. Yeah.
He needs some R&R and a nice long 12 sessions with the ship psychologist.
Somebody needs a spa day. So there's get him a puppy. So that poor little man. Anyway, I love the show so much, and they just did again such a love letter to 800 episodes worth of Star Trek. So that's not easy to pull off. And I'm very excited to see how they end it.
Yep, me too.
I don't know how many episodes are left, but we're on a steady clip, and they keep.
And hopefully many more seasons.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yes. So with that, next month we get Discovery, and Prodigy is supposed to start soon. I don't remember when. So again, there's no shortage of Trek coming out right now. So with that, everyone, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Legal Geeks. We have a Patreon that has some additional content that wasn't released publicly. There's, we like hearing from folks, so tweet at us, send us notes through the website. And everyone, stay safe, stay healthy, and above all else, stay geeky.